Alright, this is a quick yell on the Bescor AL576Ks, and these are great. You can adjust these up and down the spectrum. Fantastic lights. They've got a whole big barrier of LED light that you can work through. Blinding if you need it to be, and you can tune it right down so it's completely usable. The only downside on these is they have some really crappy power supplies. So the way this power supply is designed, the cord really isn't quite long enough to be usable with them at full extension. So what ends up happening, people leave the power cord plugged into this end, they get dropped, the power cord mashes into here, and then let me go to the one that I've taken apart here. And what ends up happening is these things wiggle loose. As you can see, that one is no longer adhered to the rivet, and that's why this one isn't working anymore. So I'm gonna hook that one back up, and you can usually tell because once it wiggles a few times, that's it for that. That no longer functions. But it's still kind of held into place because they've got a massive amount of this rubberized epoxy. I don't know what that junk is. It's not even a thermal barrier. It's just like basically a glue that they use to kind of hold stuff in position, but obviously it didn't do its job super well because that's not working. The rest of the power supply seems to work fine. It's all built fairly well, but it was practically impossible to get into. I had to use a Dremel to cut around the side of it, which means that this is going to be a real treat to put this thing back together too. And then they used more of that glue to glue the circuit board to it, to use it as an isolator, which I think is kind of a cheap and cobby way to do that. So I'm not super impressed with the power supply. I'm also not impressed. Let me see if I can hold this steady so I can show you how they got this soldered into the board. Come on, focus, you little bugger. That's just really piss poor. I know you probably can't see that. Let me see if I can zoom in. That might help. Yeah, that looks like it was soldered by ferrets. So that's yet one more failure point on here. And no, I didn't cut any of that stuff. That's actually how that board was done. So sorry about the shaking. Oh yeah, solder blob. Nice. Alright, so I got a slightly better view of this now. I chipped out the epoxy away and everything. You can see how that normally would sit on there. Just kind of sits on there. It's not even a great, not even a great rivet. I'm going to try and tap that on and solder it. We'll see if this plastic around the side will take the solder. If it doesn't, I'm just going to have to drill right through, put a cord through, tie a knot in it for strain relief, and call it a day. Alright, jam that piece back into place. Got it as hot as I could get it, and soldered it up. Hopefully that'll hold. I'll also use not a heat gun. I'll use a glue gun, and I'll put some goop all over this just in case it does break loose. The two contacts can't make contact with each other. Kind of like what it had before, except for all I have is a hot glue gun instead of whatever epoxy type stuff that they were using. Which will be fine because it insulates just the same. But it looks like that might just hold. It could be okay. I should probably actually solder this one proactively. But there's such sketchy connections, I don't want to damage anything fixing it. So I originally used my Dremel cutoff wheel to get the case open. So I cut all the way around lengthwise to get this case open. And what I'll end up doing is I'll put some sort of epoxy around the edges of this to hold it together. I'll also use a fast-acting glue, like a super glue, just to do the initial connection, and then try and fill the gap in. So I got it so that it fits fairly tight, but you can see there's gaps there, which is intentional because you need a place for the glue. Okay, so I got this thing strapped up because I want to take and use my heat gun on this. I'm just basically going to secure these as best I can because pretty much like the OEM, I want to make sure that none of this stuff gets away. I'm going to need two hands because I can't push that thing in with the other hand, but you get the idea. I'm basically just going to glue the living crap out of that without touching anything that's going to bother it heat-wise. Alright, I think I've got that gooped up pretty good, so no matter what anybody does to the power supply, drops or what have you, nothing's going to get out of that pile there, and nothing's really touching the coil, so I don't have to worry about anything there. Looks like everything's in fairly good shape. I don't think anything's really damaged per se in there. I think that piece was just stamped on there poorly and it just broke away. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to attach this power supply up. Okay, that's off. And that's hooked up. Turn that on. It's a good sign. No sparks. Although I don't want to touch anything in there right at the moment. Like I said, I really like these lights because you can dial them right up. See how much brighter it's getting back there. Fantastic range on these things. So 10 is the lowest they go. Show the front of this thing. So I'm going to turn this thing up. And the camera's going to adjust for it anyway, so you're not going to get the true brightness of it. But yeah, these things are crazy bright. So I'm going to leave this at 100%. I'll leave the power supply set up. That's not going to go anywhere, and I'm going to let this do a burn-in test. And I'll test this again once I get the case back on and I get the case glued on there, just to make sure everybody stays secure. But I think this will be a halfway decent fix, and if not, we'll just order another power supply. And just for full disclosure, I was noticing the glob of stuff right there. So I'm heating up my glue gun once again. So what I want to do is I want to put probably a glob over on this side, and maybe something just on the edge of this, just to keep that board held down, just in case it was a reason for them having that not as free floating. I think it's held by the heat sinks on either side, but better safe than sorry. And the glue gun is extremely cheap to operate, so I'd rather have more than less. Okay, hit all four corners, and once again I'm doing another run test on this. Just gonna let this thing hover for a while. But I've been wiggling this around just to see if anything's gonna break loose. Doesn't look like it is so far, and it'll be more secure once I get the case on top. All right, for my next trick, I'm going to apply epoxy all the way around the edge of this. I have a two-part epoxy here. It's one of my favorite no-name brands. I just pull the plungers back open and bolt these down because these caps don't seem to stay on here terribly well. But if I keep them solid like this, I can keep this epoxy fresh. After I pull back a little bit, I can keep this epoxy fresh for a few months. So I'll stir this stuff up, apply it around the edge, and see what we get. Get a little bit of epoxy on there. I'm just getting along the edge. I'm going to have to obviously wipe off some excess here. That just kind of gives you the idea of what I'm doing. I gotta have both hands because I gotta hold that thing steady because I want to get a little bit more even distribution on the edge here. But you get the idea. It's pretty evenly glued, except for, of course, that spot I'm showing you right now. Epoxied all the way around. So I'll run this thing for probably about, say, at least an hour, maybe two, if at full load, side by side with another one of these lights with the normal power supply. This develops any temperature above what the normal unit develops, then it's going to be a fail. I'll have to chuck it out and buy another power supply. But if it stays the same temperature and doesn't come apart, then good to go. I'll consider that a win, and then I'll put the safety sticker back on it, and away she goes. Okay, and this whole system's been running for at least 2.5 hours now. And we're up at 100%, and they are both just as warm. So I didn't break the isolation or anything like that with the repaired unit. So I think we're 100% go. So I'll send them back out in the field again, and if they break, hopefully the one that breaks is not the one that I fixed.